Okay, so last week we have talked about the background and the purpose of the Heidelberg Catechism and how it fits in the historical times in that day. But we also discussed what is solid comfort, right? How do we experience this solid comfort? There are three things we must know. Yeah. So just to recap last week's session, solid comfort comes by us knowing that we belong to Christ. We are no longer His enemies, and that nothing, not the enemies of God, can even thwart Christ's ownership over you, right? Not even your sin, Satan, or the world. They cannot touch or take that ownership of God from you. And when you belong to God, God is responsible over you, to care for you, to guard you, make sure that you stay His. He does not lose ownership. Yeah, you are His because He made up His mind long ago, before the foundations of the earth. Yes. Right? He has made up His mind over you already. And that you, to experience this comfort, you need to know these three things. We call them the triple knowledge comfort. Yeah, these three things: the greatness of my sin and my misery. Number two, the manner to be saved from my sin and misery. Number three, the way I can show my thankfulness to God. Knowing these three things is how you experience this solid comfort. Yeah. These three things, in fact, serves the structure of the entire Heidelberg Catechism. These three knowledge. The whole catechism is divided into these three parts. So today, we are introducing the first part of the Heidelberg Catechism, which is our sin and misery. We will look more into detail into this part before we move on to the second one. And today, we will be covering Lord's Day number 2 to 4. That is question and answer 4 to 11. Yeah. So I promise to cut short compared to last week, because last week's session was quite long. Yeah. Question 3. Yeah. From where do you know that you are in misery? How do you know that you are in misery? Yeah. The answer is this: the law of God reveals my misery. Right? What does that mean? Through the law of God is the knowledge of sin. Romans chapter 3 verse 20. How do you know one thing is sinful? Who gets to decide that? But God alone. By His law. In fact, the law reveals the holiness of God, His righteousness, right? So when we see the law becomes like a mirror. We look at our own sinfulness, right? So the law reveals that. Cursed be he that confirmeth not all the words of the law, to do them. Deuteronomy 27:26. From the law, not only we know our sin, we know the curses of which we do not fulfill the law, correct? The curses are invoked. We realize the curses that we are under, right? For breaking the laws. Why? Because we are always right in our own eyes. That is our own human nature. We are always right in our own eyes until we are measured by the standard of God's holiness revealed in Scriptures, specifically the law of God. Until the law of God comes, we realize it, we are always right in our own eyes. We have our own standards of righteousness, right? Then only it is revealed of our wretched condition. All of us, all of you, all of me, yeah, all of us, then only we see that very clearly. Wherefore the law is holy and the commandment holy and just and good. Romans 7:12, right? For the good that I would, I do not. But the evil which I would not, that I keep doing. That is our human nature. Yeah, Romans 7:19. Yeah, oh wretched, that's why Paul would say that, finally, oh wretched man that I am. Yeah, confessed Paul. Yeah, in Romans 7:24. Move on to question number 4. What does the law of God require of us? What does it require of us? The answer, Christ teaches us that briefly, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. This is the first and the great commandment. And the second is like to this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Christians, we know this. We know these two greatest commandments. Yeah? Because on these two commandments, as Jesus has spoken in the passage, hangs all the laws and the prophets. Yeah. What does God require of us? What does He require of us? Perfect and exclusive obedience to God. Non-exclusivity is equals to idolatry. Straight away. Non-exclusivity equals to idolatry. Perfect in what? Obedience in what? Obedience in love. Love from the heart versus an outward love. Right? One can love outwardly, but inwardly we can hate that person. It is possible. Inside we hate that person, but outwardly we just show love. That is already the breaking of the law. Why? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Outward and inward. Yeah, there is an inward affections, yet and also an inclination. They are the same thing. Yeah, inward affections and inclinations. Right. That is the heart. That speaks of the heart. Your heart. Your soul, your whole being and person talks about your will, your purpose. When the Bible talks about the soul part, it is always the will. You will to do something, you will not to do something. You shall love the Lord with all your soul, all of your soul. Yeah. Your mind, loving the Lord with your mind. That speaks about your knowledge and your understanding, to know God more, to understand God, His word. Yeah, that's why we can only love God only as far as we know Him. Yeah, why? Because it starts from the faculty of the mind that translates slowly to your emotions and to your hands. Your actions, your deeds follow. So your actions and your emotions are only limited by what you know. Up here. They are. Right? You cannot go beyond that. Right? Strength speaks of your outward. The outward, like the external, and the internal as well. Yeah? Your words, the words that you speak, the actions that you perform. Yeah? And all of this is to be according to God's law. Yeah. Oh, okay. Accidentally press up. And what does God's law also require us? The first commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Secondly, to cherishing our neighbors. Yeah. And that it only originates from the exclusive love of God. a exclusive love of God. Meaning to say, you cannot objectively love your neighbors as yourself if your love is for God and also for something else. Because it originates from a wholehearted love for God, a perfect love for God only. Like a husband and wife, your love is exclusive to each other. You cannot give your love to anyone else. Right? Yeah? And everything else that you do must originate from this love, right? For each other, right? So it's the same that if you love your neighbor, you say you love your neighbor, but your love is not exclusive for God. That is not actually loving your neighbor as yourself. Because this commandment is not a replacement of the first greatest commandment. The second greatest commandment does not replace the first commandment. In fact, the second commandment is driven, compelled by the first commandment. Do you see that? It is your love for God that compels your love for your neighbor. Alright? That drives your love for your neighbor. As much as we love ourselves, not more than our love for God. We will only love our neighbor as much as you love yourselves. Alright? And it will never be more than your love for God. Okay? Alright? This is what it teaches. Yeah? So these two greatest commandments sums up the Old Testament law and the prophets. But which commandments? We have a few kinds of laws in the Old Testament. So which really applies to us, which are not, right? The first kind is the civil laws for Israel. Yeah, these laws are for Israel only in the Old Testament. These civil laws are the criminal and the punishment code. Yeah. Laws to punish those who break the law. Yeah. This has ceased. These laws no longer applies. Why? It is because of Christ's sinlessness. He did not transgress the civil laws of Israel, and so his sinlessness is imputed to us. He has done it on our behalf. So this has ceased already. Yeah. The ceremonial laws talks about the priestly, the religious laws, right, of Israel for the priests and the tabernacle. Yeah. The Old Testament sacrificial system of worship and the purity God requires of Israel as a nation. Yeah. These has ceased. Why? Because Christ has fulfilled it. He has fulfilled the ceremonial laws by his role as high priest. Okay? But the third one, this is the one that continues. The moral laws, or we call it the covenantal laws. These laws are for all mankind. Universal. This is not just limited to the nation of Israel. It is universal for every person on this earth. It is why, and it is because it is embedded in every human heart, but written down for Israel, codified, written down for Israel, right? And this involves moral behaviors and the holiness required by the holy God. Why do we say embedded in every human heart? Because those who never heard of the gospel, when they break one of these moral laws, they know it is wrong. Lying, right? They don't need to read the 10 Commandments to know that lying is wrong. Stealing, they don't need to read the 10 Commandments to know that stealing is wrong, right? Why? Because God has embedded into the heart. It is by this, even this knowledge, the conscience, testifies of the existence of God. Right? So it is. That's why we say embedded in every human heart. So this laws continues today. Okay. Question 5. Can you keep all these things perfectly? Can you keep all these things perfectly? What are your answers to that? Can you keep all these things perfectly? Leon, can you? No. Perfectly, no. Answer, by no means. By no means. For I am prone by nature to hate God and my neighbor. Alright? Short answer is this, hell no. Literally, we are condemned to hell. We are hell bound. And why? Because we cannot. It is our inability. Alright? But wait a minute. God's law requires us to love God and man perfectly, correct? Right? But we cannot keep it. But in nature, we are inclined and fixated on hell and evil. On evil. That's why we are condemned to hell. By nature. But why does the law still require us to do that? Isn't it fair? Is it fair? Let's look further. Genesis 6:5. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And this is, you cannot get any more clearer than that. Every imagination means every. It's not an exaggeration. Yeah? The thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Romans chapter 8 verse 7. Even in the NT you get that verse. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God. For it is not subject to the law of God. Neither indeed can be. So even the carnal mind, alright, is not subject under the law of God, but it does not have the ability to do so. Right? It does not have the ability to do that. The inability of our human nature. Alright? Ephesians chapter 2 verses 1 and 3. You were dead in trespasses and sins. We all had our conduct in times past in the lusts of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath, even as no different than others. We were no different than the rest of mankind. We were by nature children of wrath, under the wrath of God. Alright? Condemned to hell. Yeah. But note here, the word that is used here, you were dead. Irene, have you seen a dead man do anything for itself except but to rot and smell? Right? The dead man cannot resurrect itself from the grave. It can do nothing. Nothing. It cannot even choose to say the sinner's prayer. Yeah? It cannot even call out to God. Right? But Paul here purposely uses the word dead is because it is entirely the work of the Holy Spirit to raise you from the dead spiritually first. You were resurrected from the dead spiritually first to put your faith in Christ. Yeah, which we will also talk about more in the future in the catechism. But note here, you were dead. It is a total inability. Totally unable to keep God's laws at all. To do what is required. All of our minds love the Lord, all of our minds. Our understanding is darkened When we talk about loving God with all of our mind, because our mind, it begins with our mind, right? Right? It begins in the faculty of our mind. But our understanding is darkened. Yeah. Our understanding is darkened. It means our conscience are hardened and it deceives itself to think that it is not hardened, to think that it is fine. The conscience, loving God with all of our minds, can we do that? Not really. What more? All of our hearts. We have, by ourselves, left to our own selves, we have sinful passions. Right? We have appetites that are stirred, not that is being alienated from God, which God does not have any involvement to. We have appetites, sinful appetites, and passions, right? Can we love God with all of our hearts? Can we love God with all of our strength? Actions and words. Our actions and words are hypocritical, even to one's own standards. We set our own standards. We say we will do this standard and we behave another way that is contradicting. We are hypocrites ourselves and we condemn others for not keeping to our standards. We are hypocrites, right? What more on God's standards, right? Can we love God with all of our soul? We cannot, because we can't even do any of the above. So we cannot say, because our soul consists of our mind, hearts, and strength. Yeah, it consists of our mind, hearts, and strength, which comes out our will. We will something to happen or not. Yeah, so we cannot love God with all of our soul. The good that we do even falls short of God's perfection. Can we still do good deeds? Yes, we can. But it even falls short of God's perfection. Why? Because beneficence for self-benevolence, not God's. You know what is the difference? Beneficence means the graces that we show. Yeah? We perform good deeds. Yeah? But benevolent is a good will. There's a difference of will and action. The will is the benevolence, the beneficence is the action. Yeah? The beneficence, the good deeds that we do, is often for our own self-good, for our own self-interest, not God's best interest, not God's glory. Yeah? The good, the charities, sacrifices that we do is often used to save and preserve our own face. Reputation, our own reputation, to gain maybe glory and praises in other people's eyes, and even increase our own merits. Yeah, so that I get a bit merits, I feel good about it. Yeah, it is not God's glory. It's not really for God's glory, nor does it acknowledge Christ's merits. Even our good deeds we do, it does not do it in such a way that it acknowledges Christ's merits. We don't. It's about self-preservation. And it is often at the expense of other people's disadvantages and sufferings, evil or harm. It is never pure. Even our good deeds, right, are never pure. We can still do good deeds. We are not saying that we will never do good deeds, yeah. But it is never pure. And often, it is our own definition of good, not God's definition. Sin in His righteousness, yeah. We define our own good, and we do that good. Yeah? We justify it. The evils that it causes, we just justify it. I do this good, man. Huh? Yeah. So the evil and bad that we do, yeah, obviously, yeah, we do evil and bad. The issue is not that we are as bad as the worst of men. That is not the issue here. We may not be the worst man in this planet. You may think of Hitler. You may think the next evil man, the evil man that you have in mind. Yeah, you are not as bad as that person. But the issue here is not that. The issue here is we sin constantly, even when we appear to be good, benevolent in the eyes of the world. We even sin constantly in doing that. We may appear benevolent in the eyes of the world, but we sin against God. Yeah, we are always itching to do what we are prohibited. I tell you not to touch that chair. You will find the itch to touch that chair. Maybe there put the chair, do not sit on it, broken. Yeah, put the label there. Do not sit on that chair, broken. You will start to itch for it. Wait, I want to sit on it. And you go ahead and sit on it, and then people come and ask you, why do you sit on it? You will justify it and say, I just want to try, experiment on it. But the issue here is you broke that commandment, right? That instruction, correct? So we always have that itch. Yeah, we could actually care less for the laws of God and man. God says don't do it. We start to itch to do it. Yeah, we even find it difficult to keep our own laws. We even break our own laws, our self-made laws, being inconsistent to our own rules and standards that we set. Being hypocrites ourselves. That is just who we are. That's just our nature. Even our own laws, we don't really keep our own laws. Yeah. Even we have our own definition of evil. Wow. We call something evil, we assume that to God that is evil. That in itself also, because we do not know God, we cannot say we love God with all our minds. We have our own definition of evil. Yeah? But it is not God's definition. For example, in the Old Testament, when God sends an angel and kill off 450,000 people, what is the natural reaction of the world? Wow, God so evil one. God can send an angel and kill off so many people. God called the Israelites to purge the Canaanites in the promised land. Why does God call Israel to commit such homicide? God is evil. Why? Because the world have their own definition of what evil is. Okay? Does man hate God ultimately? By these behaviors, by this nature? John chapter 3, verses 19 to 20. And this is the condemnation, that light is come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone that doeth evil hates the light, and neither comes to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. Other gods, idolatry, blaspheming the name of God, do not keep the day of worship. These things, we transgress these things, isn't it? Right? We have other gods, we commit idolatry, we blaspheme the name of God, take the name of God in vain. We do not even keep the Sabbath, remember the Sabbath, keep the day of worship. But does he hate man? Does God hate man? Titus chapter 3 verses 3. Does man hate man? Does man hate man? Yes. Titus chapter 3 verse 3. For we ourselves also were sometimes foolish. Christians themselves. Foolish, disobedient, deceived, serving diverse lusts and pleasures, living in malice and envy, hateful, and hating one another. Right? We do have the propensity to hate each other. hate our neighbors, like disobedience to authorities. We murder, we commit adultery, we even steal, we lie, right? We even give ourselves to greed. We become greedy. This hatred of God and man means we cannot fulfill God's laws. God will not accept a loveless obedience. That is the key. Love. Loveless obedience. Love is the heart of every commandment and the fulfillment of the law. Love is the heart of it all. Sinners may love their children, but it is an imperfect and not perfect obedience. It is an imperfect love, and not perfect obedience to God's law, right? To lie, steal, kill for children's well-being. Truth tellers may not lie, but they don't love God. Thus, their truthfulness is not an acceptable sacrifice. The sacrifice of the wicked, in Proverbs 18 verse 5 says, is an abomination to the Lord. But the prayer of the upright is his delight. Question 6. Did God then create man so wicked and perverse? This is the question, isn't it? God requires us to love God and our neighbor. But we can't do it. We cannot do it. Is it fair? But we must ask this question first. Did God then create man so wicked and perverse? The answer, by no means. In fact, God created man good and after his own image, in righteousness and true holiness, that he might rightly know God, his creator, and heartily love him and live with him in eternal happiness, to glorify him and praise him. All of us are born in sin, right? So the question is this: so did God actually create man to be like that? If yes, if the answer is yes, then God is at fault, correct? God created you to be sinful, then God is the one at fault for putting the law of God saying you must fulfill this law, love God, love your neighbor, but yet created you to be evil, to break it. Then God is at fault, right? But if not, if God did not create us to be like that, then the sinful nature of man is not God's fault. Correct? The sinful nature of man is not God's fault, because God did not create man to be like that. And man is fully responsible, guilty for it. Which is the obvious answer. No, God did not create man to be like that. In fact, God created man in his image. Genesis 1, 26 to 27. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. We were created to be image bearers. We bear the image of God, right? We are created, meaning to say we are created in his likeness, and a reflection of something, of someone, right? To bear an image is to bear the reflection, but it is not necessarily equal. a reflection of the mirror does not make that reflection equal to you, right? The projector of the image. So we who are image bearers, we are not equal to God. Some Christians get this heresy, produces this heresy. We are equal to God. We are not equal to God. We are His mere image. We are made in the image of God. Image bearers. We are not equal to God. By no means. Not physically. When we talk about image bearing, we do not have the physical features of God. This is another heresy that is widely taught in the churches today. When you heard this teaching before, you look at each other, God looks like that. Wrong teaching. It is an error. It is an error. God does not look exactly like you, right? Physically. So you do not have the physical image of God, but you have a spiritual image of God. That is different. Why? Because you are made to resemble God's qualities. What kind of qualities? His being, His wisdom, His power, His holiness, justice. You are able to reason because God is able to reason. These are spiritual qualities. Reasoning, your rationale. You possess a sense of justice, of good and right, good and evil, injustice. So why do men have this universally? It's because God created all men to have these spiritual qualities. Because God is like that. Image bearers. That is what we mean. Image bearers. So, meaning to say, if God created for that purpose, to have the spiritual qualities of God, right? You have the responsibility to reflect God's image on earth. To have the same spiritual qualities as He has. Not physical image, right? But spiritual qualities. Why? Why is this purpose for? To rule creation on God's behalf with His qualities. You rule with His spiritual qualities. That is the reason why you were created. For this purpose, to work. Wow. Not to be lazy. In fact, to work, to have dominion over His creation. To exercise His qualities that He has given you. You reflect His image. Spiritual image. In fact, God created man to be happy, to be joyful and immortal, not to be in misery. And this perfect enjoyment comes from a relationship with God. We used to have that. Adam had that. Adam and Eve, right? So the original state of man was created perfectly good in God's image, reflecting His holiness and righteousness. And God created man innocent, without sin, right? To be without sin. But this is the part where you are not equal to God, right? This is the part where you are not equal to God. You are not invulnerable to sin because you are an image. You are not the projector himself, right? He projects his image, but the reflection is not of equal value or ability as with God, right? So, men are not invulnerable to sin, but we were created innocent. Because He is created, He is not the creator. We are not the creator. That's the truth of the matter, right? We do not have the value of the creator, the uncreated creator. We do not have the same equal with them. We are created creatures. So we are innocent. We were innocent. But it is not the same thing as the inability to sin. which only God has it. God has the inability to sin. Man does not in the beginning. Yeah? Question 7. Then where does this depravity of human nature comes from? Where does it come from? Answer: from the fall and disobedience of our first parents, Adam and Eve. This is where it came from. Yeah? In paradise. Hence, our nature is become so corrupt that we are all conceived and born in sin. It comes from the fall and the first sin of man, Adam and Eve. Now, this is the origin of our depravity, of our sinful nature. Right? This is the origin. This is what we call, theologians, Leon, I know you like theologians, original sin. We call it original sin. Alright? It is coined by Augustine, actually. Yeah? Augustine. The first, what does it teach? What is original sin? It is the first sin of man, or the fall, was of disobedience. Genesis 2, verse 16 to 17. And the Lord God commanded, right? The word there, commanded, that is the first time the word there appears. Commanded man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat. You may freely eat. Yeah? But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat of it. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. We are familiar with this verse. But note the word commanded here. God commands. That is the first time God commands. Right? And if you break that command, what will happen? The day you break it, the day you die. Right? The day you break it, the day you die. And so, man, as instigated by the serpent, meaning to say, being deceived by the serpent, right? And tempted by the serpent, being manipulated, right? And unto prideful ambition and admiration, man desire what? Man desire equality with God. Men were created in what? God's image. Is the reflection of equality with God? Is the reflection on the mirror equal to the projector? No. But the first sin is this: we desire equality with God. Yeah? Man therefore subject him or herself unto unbelief of God's command. So when they desire equality with God, God had previously commanded. It just shows that man did not believe God. He believed the serpent who deceived, right? Right? The day that you eat of the fruit is that you, God knows that you will be God. You'll be like gods, right? And so man subject himself into unbelief of God's commandment, right? That is to command means here prohibition and punishment. Yeah? Which was assailed by the serpent, you shall surely not die, for you shall be like gods, knowing good and evil. So Eve believed the devil rather than God, and Adam believed his wife, not the serpent. Adam believed Eve rather than God. Right? That's the order. Yeah? So man willingly strive for contempt, to be ingratitude, unnatural, perverted posterity. Yeah? There is a perverted, the whole image of God completely perverted. corrupted, twisted, right? Even the purpose of being an image bearer already twisted. The purpose of the image bearer is what? To have dominion over, to rule God's creation with his qualities. Even that purpose is twisted by this lie, right? By believing on the lie. And so men became, they basically apostatized. They committed apostasy. They left God. Right? They left their trust in God as the one who created him to be his image, to reflect his image. And so it is important here to note that God did not create man to be tempted. God did not create man to be tempted, but for the purpose of reflecting his image. That is the purpose. Man pervert his own image-bearing design in order to be God, to be equal to God. Right? So who is responsible? Man. Man is naturally responsible. Right? God did not tempt Adam, correct? The devil did. And man's free will, right, preferred the serpent's disposition over God's commandment. Alright? Man, by his free will, right, chose the serpent's instigation rather than God's commandment. God did not lie to Adam. The devil did. And man preferred his lie. Right? And this is what original sin teaches. The theological term. Yeah? Original sin. All became partakers of Adam's sinfulness, having original sin. Right? We are not sinners here because we sin. Wait a minute. We sin because we are sinners. Understand that? There's a difference there. We are not sinners because we sin. Oh, we sin only then we become sinners. No. We sin because we are sinners. We are not innocent. Meaning to say, we are not innocent, naturally innocent. We are already guilty of it with the abilities to be guilty. This is what original sin is. Yeah? Very reformed compared to other denominations. We teach original sin. This is what Augustine teaches. This is what John Calvin followed after Augustine by hundreds of years later. And so there are two effects of man's fall into sin. Notable effects. Through the original sin, all mankind is guilty and condemned. Even babies. Even babies. Do not assume that we are innocent. In fact, if you talk to evangelicals today, statistics in America have shown 70%, over 70% of evangelicals today, you ask them, are men innocent? They will say yes. Straight away, born innocent. They will say yes. Men are born innocent. Because if a baby was born, didn't commit any sin, so the baby must be innocent. Right? We think that way. We often think that way. So if the baby dies, the baby goes to heaven. Right? No. Original sin teaches that even the baby that is born is already guilty. Oh wait, this is controversial here. Right? Very difficult to swallow. Bear with me for a moment. Because original sin teaches that we have lost the inability to keep God's requirement. That is the difference there. Right? Number two, man became corrupt and a slave to obey his sinfulness. That is our nature. Right? even original sin affect man's natural legal position. Legally, before God, we stand guilty. Right? Naturally, that is our legal position before God. We stand guilty. Even babies, yeah, they are guilty. Why? Why is that? Because his image bearers is corrupt. It has marred God's image. How is that? Okay, the mind was affected. 1 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 14. But the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God. We cannot receive things from the Spirit of God. The natural man. Why? Because they are foolishness unto him. The things of God are foolishness to the natural man. Yeah, he cannot know them. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. Right? So you preach the gospel to the non-believers, you have them being offended, and the gospel becomes foolish to them. Why? Because in the natural state of their mind, because their minds are so darkened, they cannot grasp it. They can understand the message, but they cannot accept it. They cannot accept it. Why? Because their minds are darkened. Yeah? The heart, the human heart, right, is affected by this original sin. Jeremiah chapter 17 verses 9. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Who can know it? It is deceitful, desperately wicked. Who can know it? Yeah? Your will, but that is where your soul is. Yeah? The will is affected. Jeremiah 17:23. But they obeyed not. It is a willfully, right? Willful. They obeyed not. Neither incline their ear, but made their neck stiff, that they might not hear. So in their heart and in their will, they have fixed themselves to not hear. And they will not receive instruction. Right? So it is a matter of the will. The original sin have corrupted our will. Right? Thus, every conceivable pains and sufferings caused by sin, our sin and misery, yeah, are caused by sin as a result of original sin. The result of original sin. Question 8. But are we so corrupt that we are totally incapable and unable to do any good? And we are only inclined to do all evil? Yes. The answer is yes, unless we are regenerated, born again by the Spirit of God. Right? Unless we are regenerated and born again. Now, even before Adam sinned, in his free will, he could not maintain his obedience, right? Can Adam and Eve maintain their obedience and maintain their innocence? Well, no. Why? Because he is not God. We are image bearers, right? We bear the image of God. He is not equal to God. He doesn't have the inability to sin. Only God has it. He is not God. Alright? Though Adam was innocent, but he is not equal to God, where he does not have the inability to sin and evil. So why man's free will cannot chiefly bring him back to God? In your free will, can your free will bring you back to God? If Adam is innocent, right? He did not have that predisposition to sin yet. He does not have original sin yet, right? Even he could not maintain his obedience. He trusted Eve rather than God's commandment. Alright? Can we now, in this state, such a state, having original sin, can our free will bring us back to God? The answer is no, right? Because his natural will only choose his own course, not God's course. Right? His heart has radically died spiritually in original sin. You were dead in your trespasses and sin. Yeah, your heart is radically died. So your heart cannot seek God. So God did not confer the grace in man's will before Adam's fall. Right? Adam does not have the inability to sin. Right? He is innocent. But if God did, he would have never tried to fall upwards to be as God in his posterity. He will not try to be God, Adam and Eve. Right? His free will, in fact, proves that he wanted to be his own God. Adam wanted to be his own God. One more, there are those converted and unconverted. While both are capable to both bad and good deeds, what makes them converted at one point? Why? Because we all have this, we are unable to do this spiritual good. When we talk about original sin, we are unable to do spiritual good. We can do physical good, we can, but we are unable to do spiritual good. Romans 3:10, there is none righteous, no, not one. This is not the same as natural charity. Right? And that man is inclined to all evil. Genesis 6:5, we have read that passage, right? God saw every imagination of the heart, every thoughts of his heart was evil continually. And so, even man, your free will cannot change your own will. In your free will, you cannot change your will. Right? Your own will cannot change your own will. Right? Jeremiah 13:23. Can the Ethiopian change his skin? Or the leopard his spots? Then may ye also do good, that are accustomed to do evil. You cannot, right? It is not the same as having the ability to change mere habits. We are not talking about improving your habits here and there. No, it is about changing your own will. You cannot even change that. And so man is dead in sin, Ephesians 2:1, and you were dead in trespasses and sins. Dead, as in spiritually, you are totally deaf to the gospel. Yeah, you are spiritually blind. You don't see even a gleam of light of the gospel, and you are mute. You cannot even speak. A dead man cannot see, cannot hear, cannot understand. It is numb, and therefore undesiring towards the gospel. You were dead in trespasses and sins, right? You are undesiring towards the gospel, and only the Spirit of God can regenerate men. John chapter 3, verses 3-5. This is what Jesus said. Jesus answered and said unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born again, regenerated, yeah, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Nicodemus saith unto him, How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter the second time into his mother's womb and be born? Jesus answered, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter. He cannot enter. The word cannot, inability, yeah, cannot enter into the kingdom of God. So when we talk about regeneration, by the way, we are referring to the first resurrection. taught in Revelation. There are two resurrections in the book of Revelation. Read chapter 19, 20, 21. There are two resurrections actually. The first resurrection refers to our spiritual resurrection, our regeneration, our born again. Making the dead sinner alive again to respond to God. Question 9. But doesn't God do us injustice by requiring in His law what we are unable to do? Is God unfair? Now, to require us to do what we are unable to do, is God unfair? Not at all. Why? Why is it unfair? Why is it not unfair? It sounds unfair, right? For God made man, firstly, capable of performing it actually. But man, provoked by the devil in his own willful disobedience, deprived himself and all his posterity of those divine gifts. What do we mean? Since it is our inability, why shouldn't God be lenient with us? God knows that we have original sin. Why doesn't God be lenient with His 10 commandments? Why? Right? No. Because man was originally created with the ability to keep God's laws. In the beginning, Adam and Eve, God commanded, right? There was only one commandment, right? During Adam and Eve's time, before the fall, there was only one commandment. Now mankind in original sin are still expected to keep His commandments. Now we have 10 commandments. In the beginning, there was only one commandment, and He could not even keep that one commandment. And so there are 10 commandments to guide man back to God, to reveal a man in his original sin cannot keep the laws of God. But men are still expected to keep His commandments. Is it God's fault that man lost his ability to keep God's laws? No. In the first place, God gave you the gifts to do it. God gave you the gifts to keep His laws. You lost it. Is it God's fault that you lost it? No. Man willfully lost it. So God is not unjust because mankind is no longer able to keep His laws, since He gave them the ability to do the keeping. If your teenage son becomes a gambler and in debt, is it your fault for giving birth to the child and raising him to be decent? No. Right? It is not your fault. So it is not God's fault. God is perfectly just to require man to do something that he is made himself unable to do. God is perfectly just. God, in fact, will be unjust if He compromise and show leniency, since it betrays God's dignity, right? And His integrity, His commitment to His own righteousness, His own laws. Because why? Justice, God's justice, is tied to His commitment to the law, right? His standard of righteousness. Why? Because God is incapable of injustice. If God shows leniency to you, to me, God will be incapable. God is capable of injustice. God will be unjust. But God is incapable of injustice. 2 Timothy 2:13, He abides faithful, and He cannot deny Himself of His justice. God cannot deny Himself of His justice. So the requirement to obey perfectly is given. But because man sold his own ability, of the soul to the devil's lie for a false deification. He sold his own ability to keep his laws. He sold it in order to get godhood, to become God, like God. Man sold his ability away in order to try to be God. That is original sin. So it is the original sin, meaning to say inability to keep God's laws. We are born in it. We are born with this inability. And here it says inability does not reduce your responsibility, correct? It does not reduce your responsibility or your culpability to keep God's requirements for men. Question 10. Will God suffer such disobedience and rebellion to go unpunished? By no means. God will not tolerate it. By no means, but is terribly displeased with our original sin as well as actual sins, and will punish them in his just judgment temporarily and eternally, as he hath declared, "Cursed is everyone that continueth not in all things which are written in the book of the law, to do them." Cursed. The curses are there. So God is just and fair to punish sinners severely. God's punishment is for now. Now, God is already punishing. God's judgment is still enacting in all mankind, and also for all eternity. It is our misery of punishment. This is our misery. We experience this misery now because of God's punishment in this life. Right now, it began already. Our sin, though finite and overlooked by us, is an infinite offense against the infinitely holy God, because it transgresses his commandments in his eternal covenant with man. What do we mean by that? Because the agreement is this: God created us to be image bearers. The agreement is this: do not eat of the fruit, right? And you are to have dominion over creation, to reflect his image. This is the requirement, right? This is the promise made between God and man, right? We are the one who broke it, right? We are the one who broke it. And so, right, this is the transgression of his eternal covenant, right, made with man. We have transgressed it by losing the ability to keep it. We have already transgressed it. This is what it means. Therefore, God is terribly displeased with us in original sin and personal sins, which we increases in them daily. So there is original sin, and there are actual sins that we commit daily. We increases in them. We compound upon them. So God will be unfair and unjust to grant unearned pardon or overlook our sins. We may overlook our sins. We may forget them. The sins that we do yesterday, last year, 10 years ago, decades. But God does not overlook them. Because God remembers everything. God sees everything. Alright? God does not overlook any sin. Only a corrupt king judge would do that, right? Only a corrupt king judge will do that. Deuteronomy 27:26 and also Galatians 3:10, for as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse, for it is written, "Cursed is everyone that continueth not in all things which are written in the book of the law to do them." Numbers 23 verse 19. God is not a man. God is not like a corrupt judge king, who can overlook wrongdoings. That he should lie. He will not lie. neither the Son of Man, that he should repent. Have he said, and shall he not do it? Or have he spoken, and shall he not make it good? If God says, "Cursed is the one that does not continue in the law," can he lie to his own words? He cannot. He will not. Yeah. So the last question of today, question 11. But is not God also merciful? But is not God also merciful? Answer: God is indeed merciful, but also just. Therefore, his justice requires that sin, which is committed against the most high majesty of God, be also punished with extreme, that is, with everlasting punishment, both of body and soul. Right? Both of body and soul. God is merciful, but as the King Judge, he will never be merciful at the expense of divine commitment to justice. He will not sacrifice justice to be merciful. Okay lah, I close two eyes lah, or I close one eye. You do this wrong thing, I don't want to punish you. I close one eye lah. God will not suspend his justice. He will show mercy, but never at the expense of divine commitment to justice. That's what it means. In fact, God's mercy is infinite. Psalms 103, verses 8 to 9. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and plenteous in mercy. He will not always chide, neither will he keep his anger forever. God's pardon of the wicked. If God were to pardon the wicked, God will deny vengeance to the righteous. Right? In every sin of the wicked, right? Someone suffered for that sin. Someone paid the price. Someone stole your property, right? You suffered for the loss of the property, correct? If God were to pardon the wicked now, you will cry out to God, "Where is my justice?" Right? God, you're so unfair, right? So will God pardon the wicked? Just close two eyes, show mercy. God will be unjust to do that. Right? Hebrews 10 verses 30 to 31. For we know him that hath said, "Vengeance belongeth unto me, I will recompense, saith the Lord. And again, the Lord shall judge his people. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God." In fact, God will ensure that justice will be exacted on every single sin. Psalms 5 verses 4 to 6. For thou art not a God that hath pleasure in wickedness, neither shall evil dwell with thee. The foolish shall not stand in thy sight. Thou hatest all workers of iniquity. Thou shalt destroy them that speak leasing. The Lord will abhor the bloody and deceitful man. That is God's divine commitment, to his justice. But God is exceedingly merciful, but also exceedingly just for the undeserving saints. God will be lenient because we are unable to obey. Will God be lenient? No. Our inability to keep his requirement is no excuse. You were created to obey, actually. You have given the ability to obey, in fact. But you self-destructed your own ability. This is original sin. You lost the ability. That in itself makes you guilty. Right? Will God show mercy? Yes. Yes. But he must first exact the punishment of hell for every sin done by us. He must exact the punishment first. to show mercy. Yeah? To show us mercy, someone else must suffer our hell severely in substitution to satisfy the eternal demands of his justice. Someone must suffer in your place first, right? Must suffer your hell. He must exact hell, right? His punishment, eternal punishment on every single sin. Someone else must bear that punishment in order to be merciful to you. He will punish someone in your place. So he bore your hell. Yeah? Someone has to do that first. Is God extremely lenient and just against the reprobates? Reprobates are those who are unrepentant. They are not regenerated. They are wicked. God is both lenient and just. In fact, right now, God is bearing with them mercifully by presently pass them over to be given into their own sin and the misery of this life and present death. In fact, God is postponing and delaying the severe punishment of hell that they deserve now. The wicked deserve hell right now, but God is bearing with them. They are delaying and being merciful by what? Showing them the gospel. God is very merciful with the wicked, sending people to them to preach the gospel to them. Yeah. The gospel is both God's leniency and a judgment to them, as their impenitence and refusal of the gospel further compounds their punishments greatly. Even they will refuse the gospel, definitely, and it will compound upon their sins even more. Yeah? Because why? They deny God's leniency of the possibility of deliverance from God's wrath. They say, the gospel says what? Deliverance from God's wrath. They say, no. We will rather we love to work in our sins. I don't want God's leniency. In fact, give me your full wrath. That is what they are saying. Give me all you got. Give me your best shot, God. That is the wicked, the fool in the heart that says, there is no God. You don't exist, oh God. That is what they say. And they say, I don't want this God. So when God punishes their body and soul in hell as a faithful judge king, he is merely exacting the eternal torment that they deserve. They already deserve it already. And compounded and accumulated, God takes no delight in the eternal damnation of the reprobates. God does not delight in that. But God is committed to his justice. And he will do it. Yeah? Ezekiel 18:23, have I any pleasure at all that the wicked should die, saith the Lord God, and not that he should return from his ways and live? Say unto them, as I live, saith the Lord God, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that the wicked should turn from his way and live. Turn you from your evil ways. For why will you die, O house of Israel? God is not a sadist, right? That enjoys burning people in hell. But in fact, beats them. Keep beating them. Even though they will keep rejecting, but God keeps on mercifully beats them to repent. Because God has no pleasure in sending them to hell. And so our only comfort is our belonging to Christ. Belonging to Christ is our only comfort in life and death. To know this comfort, we must first know our sin and misery, the deliverance we have, and the thankfulness we should have, and our required obedience. The law of God shows us how sinful and miserable we are. The law teaches us to love God and man perfectly. We cannot keep the law perfectly. That is the truth, because we are wicked. We have original sin. And this original sin speaks of our guilty state. God did not create us wicked, yes, but in his image and good. Our wicked state came from the first sin, so that we were born sinners. We cannot do any spiritual good pleasing to God until the Spirit regenerates us. Our sure judgment. Yeah? God is not unfair to require us to keep the law we cannot keep. This is what we covered today. God is and will punish the disobedience presently and eternally. So while God is merciful, He is also just and will punish sin to the uttermost. So that's all for today. Any questions before we proceed to the evening service? A short toilet break, 5 minutes. Any questions do you have?
My question one. You know, when Jesus was hanged on the cross, he had two thieves with him.
Yeah.
One was Bogla. The other one, he was pardoned.
Yes, pardon.
But he was still a thief until he reached the cross.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what is the time limit of the suffering and
Time limit of what?
of the thief suffering for his sins?
Time limit. Okay, I don't.
Penalty.
That penalty.
Penalty, yeah. Penalty of the sin of the.
I know Jesus he can pardon him straight away, but see sometimes people do some sin, they suffer.
Yeah.
Correct, no?
Yeah,
They
directly.
suffer.
Yeah.
This was a thief. Until the end, he went there, he was still a thief. But Jesus told him, do you believe in me now? You are in heaven.
Oh, Jesus says, today you will be with me in paradise.
Did
Yeah.
he mean that this today?
Does it mean? Oh, does it mean that now he's in heaven?
Does it mean his sins are all forgiven?
It meant that when Jesus died on the cross, He intentionally died for the thief next to him.
Okay.
Intentionally.
So
And applied immediately the death, even though he did not die yet. He was still drawing breath. Jesus was drawing breath.
He was talking about it. He was saying it.
But Jesus already pardoned the thief by what his death, final death, credited into his account in that sense.
So there is no period of suffering. You do a sin, you come to the Lord, you don't have to suffer.
Suffer for, you mean suffer?
Suffer for the penalty for the sin.
Hell, you mean hell?
But
Yes.
Jesus said,
Why?
He didn't go to heaven.
Suffer earth or
Jesus said, you go to heaven, paradise.
Yeah.
So, in the end, he died.
Yep.
Okay. So, what is the penalty, or what is the duration of the sins he created?
Hell.
So, the
Hell.
duration is hell, but it's so fast. Jesus said, you are in heaven now.
Yeah. And so Jesus, that's what Reformed theology teaches, is that Christ intentionally died for sinners. He already had in mind who he will die for. He had in mind to die for the thief next to him, and the other, he did not die for the thief, for the other thief. Wow, very controversial, right? Very controversial. And immediately he died in his place already. And that is how the Old Testament church, the saints in the Old Testament, that is how they are saved. Because they saw the shadow of Christ, the one whom God will provide atonement for, and they trusted in and repented in that future Christ, the anointed one, who will suffer in their place. And that is how they are in heaven. Even though Jesus didn't come yet in the New Testament, right? Jesus haven't come yet. But the Old Testament, Abraham, right? Isaac, Jacob, the patriarchs, David, the saints of the Old Testament, the church of the Old Testament, that's how they will go to heaven. Because in the future, it is credited for all these ones. Jesus already paid, and he will pay. They just go to heaven first, And Jesus comes at the right time, the fullness of time, and paid for the sins. And yet another group, Jesus did not die for them. Wow. That is a hard teaching. Very hard teaching.
To understand.
It shows, wow, God, how come you only die for some people? You don't die for the rest of mankind. What about them? Are you showing favoritism? Are you unfair? But what we have just read just now, God simply gave them what they deserve already. Hell. This is what they already deserve justly. God simply passed them over, but He showed mercy to some people by dying for them only. Yes. This is what Scripture teaches. And a lot of people, because finds it hard to believe, hard to swallow, so to speak, they will change the interpretation. They will deny certain interpretations of the Bible, which is so plain interpretation. You cannot get any simple interpretation as this. The thief went to heaven. Brother Rama, the thief went to heaven simply because Christ said so. Christ chose that the thief can go to heaven. The thief did not choose. The thief did not even go through the Heidelberg Catechism. But because Christ said so. That's the beautiful truth. Because God showed mercy, to the undeserving sinner. Very good question. Thank you so much for that. Alright, I think let's postpone our fellowship. I'm sorry again today. We had to take up more time because I just thought I had to explain more extensively on certain slides that may be difficult for you. If you please do have a short break. It's already starting